So I'll run around with the mic here and just raise your hand when you have questions. And Larry, can you hear me okay?
I can.
Okay.
Yeah, I wanted to bring up, I think you said the difference between the national parks and the national monuments was the designation, but it's also the national parks, there's no hunting allowed, and in the national parks they do allow killing of animals. I think that's a distinction that's kind of important. Also, I wanted to bring up with the commissioners, it's very important to elect someone like Ed Perlmutter or Jared Polis for governor, because the governors appoint the commissioners, and legislatively I didn't realize that 6 of them had to be ranchers or hunters, but that could be legislatively changed as well in the next legislative session if they choose to vote that differently. But the commissioners are appointed by the governor, and someone different than Hickenlooper has to be brought in for that kind of thing.
You're right about the distinction between national parks and national monuments. In terms of changing the commission, it's been difficult. I've been trying for 2 years to do that, and I've had no luck at all, because you're going up against a very powerful constituency. But if there's one thing that you want to do to help the animals, the wild animals, it's change the composition, because they set hunting policy, they set everything about hunting, what animals can be killed, how many. Let me give you just an example of the kind of stuff this commission does. Just this year they passed a rule saying that there's going to be more hunting of predators. Why? They say it's a study to determine the effect of predation on mule deer. Well, every study that's ever been done since the beginning of time says predation is not a main factor in the population of mule deer. It's the availability of food. So this is just a scam, and they just passed it for millions of dollars to make the hunters happy, to sell more licenses, because there's this shotgun marriage between hunting and fishing licenses and the funding of the department. So if anybody needs to do something on that issue, try to decouple the funding of these departments from hunting and fishing licenses. Take it out of the general fund or out of non-exploitive users of the land. But thank you for bringing that up. You're right, absolutely.
Hi, Larry. I love you to death, but when you talked about railroad tracks being a great entrance, great way for animals to move, thousands of animals have been killed on railroad tracks around the world because of it. I've seen videos of antelope measuring in the hundreds that have been slaughtered because they were trying to walk along railroad tracks. I'm not asking for a response, but I wanted to give you some good news. Okay, I'm a prairie dog advocate, and we talked about it last year, and the good news is we have managed to get a vegan onto the district's board. So hopefully we'll be able to start saving prairie dogs for a change, because right now we save 1 and 5 are killed. Thank you.
Is this on? Okay. I know that there's a lot of killing of animals on railroad tracks, and I would like to see some fencing on the side, perhaps, to keep the animals off. My main thrust was the railroad tracks in the cities, though, because that's how they get through the neighborhoods. I'm not talking about out in the open range. In the cities, they have to get from neighborhood to neighborhood, from park to park, without getting run over, and railroad tracks are a way to do that, and I think they're more beneficial than harmful. But you're quite right, there's a lot of animals killed, but there's going to be a lot more animals killed, in my opinion, trying to get there if they don't have a way through the neighborhoods. They have to cross the streets. So you're right, and I'm right too.
You mentioned the overpasses for animals with the greenery on them and everything. Are those is there any way to fund those by like tourism or anything like that? do people come to like watch the animals migrate or anything is what I'm asking.
I
And do we have any of those overpasses within the United States?
It kind of got a little fuzzy there. That first picture is not in the United States. That second one was. Colorado has a couple, or quite a few actually. I don't know the number. On 70. They're not as built out though. It's just if you're driving along 70 west, yeah, you'll see stairs. But they have done studies since they put those in. The animals are using them. When you see them, they still have to cross the highway though. So I think it's just a step in the right direction, but that I don't know of any as built out as that first picture here. There's a ton in Canada and quite a few in Europe, yeah. Oh, yeah, that's really neat, yeah. Yeah, I mean the one in, yeah, I know the one on 70 was state funded, so they did add those. Again, when you Google pictures of them, they're not going to look nearly as nice as these, but I do think it's a step, yeah.
You brought about some of the things about in law. I'm not a lawyer or anything, but I think you're bringing in things like the concept of agency law or agency rules and regulations, which are technically law, but just rulings and regulations, whereas then you have this other thing that would be called statutory law, where it's actually written, this is the code, this is what you have to do. And I think agencies are defined by those, by statutory law. And so to what degree can people go in and work through the legislative process to redefine the ability of agencies to perhaps make rules and regulations that, that help animals? Now that's one thing. Then also, you showed a picture of a tiger, and I actually wanted to ask you that since you're a lawyer, if you go back to this idea of standing, on which Dred Scott lost his case in the Taney court. And animals don't have that standing. But is it possible that people can say that they have injury or damages, if you will, based on deprivation by being denied the right to see and enjoy or simply be aware that animals are fellow citizens or denizens of this planet? Is there any legal movement towards that idea? And you know, maybe that would be probably civil action as opposed to a criminal action, because there's probably no criminal standing or statutory reason for that type of thing. Does that make sense?
Yes. It makes a lot of sense. Good question. The question is, how are we going to deal with the issue of standing? Is it possible to gain standing by showing that the person involved had an injury by the lack of contact that resulted from this animal being hurt or injured? The person's lost the contact with the animal. Doesn't that give us standing? Is that a fair estimation?
Yes, that would be very correct. So if I can't see buffalo herds, I'm being deprived.
Yes.
If I can't see elk herds, I'm being deprived. Do I have standing to present a case that could be heard so that other people who are being denied that right actually now, through us, convey rights to those animals because of our injury? Because I mean, I'd love to give the animals legal right, but they probably can't communicate with an attorney very well.
Yeah. Okay, well that's a good point. Diane, you want to speak to any of this? Do you know the standing issues? Go ahead. This is Diane Balkin.
I think we are years away from standing like that, because we have yet to have standing in court to argue the deprivation of the companionship of a pet animal that's been harmed or killed. In some states you can bring an action, but certainly not to the level that we wish or we hope. We're making baby steps in that direction, but the situation you've described, we're years away from that. So what we're trying to do at least is elevate the value of animals so that we can give them greater worth in the courtroom.
Is there any case laws or precedent-setting case law, cases that can be referred to or cited that would go along those lines?
No, not yet. We're working on it. And what we do is we do it on a case-by-case basis. I work with Animal Legal Defense Fund, and we find issues in various states, and we have a litigation department that might grab onto one where we can come in as a friend of the court to help make an argument to improve the status of animals.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just mention, too, Diane, Animal Legal Defense Fund has a booth here at VegFest. So when, oh, you did, you don't? Oh, okay. So, but they can go to, you have a website, right? So aldf.org. So if you're interested in this, I would encourage you guys to sign up, get their emails, help them out financially because it costs money to do these things too. So it's really important if you're interested to stay informed. So any other questions?
I just wanted to mention that I was, in an email, was told that, for instance, after the Civil War and the abolition of slavery, that amendment to the Constitution did not just cover humans, and some people are taking that as a way of giving animals rights as well.
That's a long shot.
It is a long shot, but it is one of the approaches that's being used now.
That's a good approach. You might as well use all the approaches. Another approach is tax. My taxes go to these terrible things that are done to animals, so I'm being injured because I'm paying taxes to torture animals in labs. And we're trying it on a number of areas, as Diane mentioned it. We're doing it on deprivation, on tax, on what you say. One of these ways is going to break through. And that's what Steve Weiss is doing all these years, is trying to get one animal to break that wall. And if that wall is broken and an animal is given standing, then that animal can be given the same kinds of legal protection as minors and children. Somebody can speak for them.
Another direction we're considering, because advances in animal protection and animal welfare are baby steps, and we just have to deal with that as a fact. So there is some movement to make animals described as sentient property, as kind of a bridge between personhood and strict property, to see if we can make advances there as well, that they should be treated differently because they are sentient creatures.
Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you guys so much. And let's hear it for Larry. Big